Toby proves the difference to put a line through Carlton's season. A halftime bake inspires the Lions, and the angle you didn't see in Gary Rohan's match winner in Geelong. All that and more to come from the round so far, brought to you by AAMI. But Kane Corns, we start tonight in Sydney. The stand-in skipper getting the job done for the Giants, starting with this massive talk on quarter time.
He was everywhere, wasn't he, Mitch? This went 67.5 metres. They've measured it. What a bomb. You just don't see it very often, and it's one of the great things in football, along with a high mark. But it didn't come without some usual Toby controversy. There's a touch of the umpire there. There's a hit behind play on Nick Newman, which he was reported for on the night. You would think it's probably a fine, albeit I wouldn't be surprised if he got a week for that. And then he just put his foot down in the last quarter with 4 goals and was once again the match winner. And he was unstoppable at times tonight, but it was the typical Toby game.
Blues got within 2 goals late, and Kane decided that he was going to put his own foot down.
Well, he did, yeah. He was enormous in the last quarter, as were the Giants, which was interesting because they're coming off a 6-day break. Carlton have had the week off. You would have thought they've got the fresh legs, but they've just been a pathetic side, Carlton, which we'll get to in a moment. But he's a genuine superstar of the game, Toby Greene, and he proved that again tonight.
On the umpire touch, most likely a fine similar to what Lachie Neale did earlier this year. He got a $1,500 fine. And then if they deem the gut punch on Nick Newman as intentional and low impact, that will also be a fine. So he probably gets off without missing a game, but he will be looked at by the match review officer. Let's get to the Blues because they were well beaten in the first quarter. This is all the vision from the second quarter, Kane, and they just didn't come to play again.
No, they didn't, and their tackle count was abysmal. And you would think with all the controversy going and with the week off that they've had to plan for a game like this, there would have been a response. Now, we'll get to some of those numbers in the first quarter. They refuse to defend. They either do not know how to defend or they refuse to defend. Now, here's Jacob Wiedering, being a bit of a hero behind the play, pointing his finger, but this is his next effort. And how easily is he pushed out of that? And Jeremy Finlayson takes another mark inside 50, one of his 5 goals for the night. Patrick Cripps is the captain. Got to be better than this. Gives away a clear free kick. Says the umpire that he didn't see or some gesture there. That cost 50. There's a held-up play outside 50. Find the easy target inside 50. The uncontested mark, Matt DeBoer, and then hand it off to Isaac Cumming, who just waltzes around. He's there for about 5 seconds, kicks his first goal. So once again, we could have shown 20 efforts like this of Carlton. I expected a response tonight. I think David Teague is under immense pressure, more so than he's ever been under. They play Adelaide next week. If they don't beat Adelaide next week, it could be a premature end to his coaching career, I fear.
The Blues are now 4-9. Kane, all those clips we just saw there were from the second quarter. They laid 8 tackles for the entirety of that second quarter. They finished minus 37 for tackles and allowed the Giants 138 marks for the game.
And that says everything you need to say about the game tonight. They just are unwilling to defend. They don't want to defend, so everyone knows how to defend. Everyone in the competition is doing the same thing. We look at Melbourne, they're just doing it better than everyone else. Slow play, they're zoning. Fast play, you find a man, you press up, you put pressure on the ball carrier. So Carlton know what to do. David Teague's been around for a long time. He knows the defensive mechanism. So it's the players refusing to do it. And we saw that they did it through patches in the back half of the third quarter tonight, and they got back into the game, which is incredibly frustrating for Carlton fans because they've seen it throughout the year that for patches they can match it with the good sides. But this was their biggest loss for the year and their most disappointing performance considering the pressure and scrutiny that the coach and the whole football club have been under coming to this game.
4 goals for Toby Greene. He was our big story. Jeremy Finlayson kicked 5 goals. He is the Saturday star, and he stood up, Kane, with no Jesse Hogan, and he had to sort of be the main focal point in attack.
Yeah, he did. I think their forward lines functioned pretty well, considering they lost, arguably the best key forward in the game, Jeremy Cameron, at the end of last year. They genuinely got some good replacement for him. I rate Himmelberg as a player, and Finlayson can do this. I'd like to see him do it a bit more consistently. So had a good opponent tonight, but he just was sharp. I thought he was sharp on the lead. He had good speed, and his ability to finish tonight stood out. So I think he can be a very good player at the level. At times he gets frustrated and he can be undisciplined, but he wasn't that tonight. And 9 goals between him and Toby Greene was the difference.
He's kicked 3 bags of 5 across his career, the second time against Carlton tonight. The Giants now just half a game outside the top 8. And you wanted to take a look at Matt de Boer's tagging job. They sent him to Sam Walsh over Patrick Cripps.
Well, it's a big compliment, isn't it, to Sam Walsh? So the opposition, the best tagger in the game, they think that Walsh is overtaking Cripps as the most damaging player. And I agree, that's been the commentary. But this is the first time he's been tagged in his career. And it was a tough night. Look, he didn't turn his toes up, as you wouldn't expect, because he's a high-quality player. But he was well beaten on the night. So just 6 kicks for Sam Walsh tonight. As I said, he didn't stop trying, but he was ineffective, particularly in the first half. And it wasn't, a full-on lockdown, one of those real tight Matt de Boer tags. You can see here that de Boer at stages went to Cripps as well. Walsh kept trying, but 6 kicks. Now, there's a clear blueprint. You play Carlton, tag Sam Walsh, and no one else is really going to step up. Patrick Cripps has been out of form all year and didn't have an impact tonight as well. So he's going to have to get used to that, unfortunately, Sam Walsh, and life as an AFL footballer is about to become a little bit more difficult than what it's been in his first 50 games.
On the other side, Lachie Whitfield was able to run free. Jacob Hopper finished with 11 clearances for the game. Back to Friday night, Kane, absolute heart-stopper in Geelong. 13 lead changes for the game. The last came after the final siren. Gary Rowan joins Barry Hall as the only player in AFL history to kick the winning goal for 2 separate clubs.
What an amazing player he's turning out to be. I said last week that Geelong had the best forward line in the competition because of that. Cameron doesn't get you, Hawkins doesn't get you. It's going to be Rowan or Dangerfield. The reaction there from Chris Scott, don't you love it? That's how much it meant to them. It was a terrific game. We're having a look at the behind the goals vision of how this came about and how Gary Rowan found himself alone inside 50. So Geelong win a stoppage. They come through fast play from their back half. Comes to a one-on-one with Cordy and Dowhouse. I think Cordy does a very good job here. The only really critical thing, he could have directed that more towards the boundary line, just to give his defenders a couple of extra seconds to find a man. And in the end, Gary Rowan read it quickly. But I'm not too critical of what the Western Bulldogs did there, apart from that kick being directed more towards the boundary. Perhaps you take the deliberate or failing to keep it in free kick, just gives your team a bit more time to get back. But in the end, it was a finals-like game, hard-fought, tough conditions, cold, slippery, and both teams lost no respect on Friday night.
And Luke Dalhouse was the one that actually tackled Cordy there to force the turnover. Dalhouse's best game in Geelong colours for some time. Tom Stewart, Kane, took 10 intercept marks, 15 intercept touches for the game. Chris Scott said it was one of the best games he's seen from a half-back flanker in the history of the game. What did you make of this?
Well, we highlighted him last week, didn't we? After Geelong took 18 intercept marks against Port Adelaide. And I said, we don't talk about Tom Stewart enough. I said, the only time we talk about him is on All-Australian night. Well, we're starting to talk about him now. And this is the reason why, because it was one of the great games from an intercepting defender that we've seen. I think he's been, one of Geelong's best ever pickups. It's a great story. And they had no answers for him. Apart from, this is what I would have done more of. So kick the ball to grass, get it in behind him. Don't give him as much time in the air and sit the ball up, which I think they did far too often, the Western Bulldogs. When you send a chaos ball in, like these 2 examples I'm going to see here, and it's not Tom Stewart, it's Geelong's defence as a whole, they can panic. So it doesn't have to be pretty. It doesn't have to be a drop punt in the air to give those interceptors the ability. It can be along the ground like that. They panic and you get 2 goals out of some smart entries that you wouldn't usually coach. But I think the opposition teams coming up against Geelong know that that's their strength. Kick it to grass, get it along the ground, and then win some one-on-ones from your smalls inside forward 50.
Josh Bruce there kicking a goal. He's now equals second with Tex behind Harry Mackay in the Coleman medal race. Kane, Joel Selwood came under hot water today for 2 separate incidents, $3,000 for the combined for the fines. This is the first one, misconduct on Bailey Dale. Probably in line with what we've seen. I know a lot of people were calling for a suspension here, but a $1,000 fine for this one. And then the second one, rough conduct, Joel Selwood, $2,000 fine on Taylor DeRay.
Yeah, you don't need to stomp on the leg in cold conditions down at Geelong. Now, I think that is an accident. Taylor DeRay was clearly upset, and I can understand why. The first one, just get your hands off the opposition's face. Look, I think the right result here, and a $3,000 fine is a solid whack for a player who's got a pretty good record over a long period of time. But just don't put your hands anywhere near the opposition's face and you won't get yourself into trouble.
Yeah, it's a surprise players are still doing it to this day after what happened with Toby Greene a couple of seasons ago. Just quickly, Mitch Duncan looks like a high-grade PCL. He's going to miss 8 to 12 weeks, the Cats are predicting, which takes him up until finals. And the Dogs now, they'll get on a plane on Sunday. They'll fly to the West, have to quarantine for 7 days before they play West Coast. at Optus Stadium. To our AAMI clangers next, Kane. 7,000 people was the cap at the crowd on Friday night. Isaac Smith, he would have been excused for thinking he was back playing local footy for Redan like he was 10 years ago.
Well, this is what happens when you sit everyone together. I'm not sure the health reasons behind everyone packing in and leaving the rest of the stadium open, so he's got to go and get his own footy. Not sure about the science behind that, but well done. He plays the game the right way. How cold was it in Tassie, Mitch?
10 degrees and they're wearing shorts. What is going on there? And this is the Falcon of the year, isn't it?
Beanie and shorts. Harris Andrews just goes whack into Calamachi's face. So cop that one once again. Cold night in Tassie. You don't need that on the nose.
And this was during the week. Mitch Robinson getting a little bit excited, which he's prone to do. Chris Fagan's 100th game in charge of the Lions. He doesn't need that in preparation.
Oh, everyone played with an annoying player, someone with too much energy. That's Mitch Robinson, but we love everything about him and you wouldn't change him for the world. And this is Harry Mackay, fresh off a 2-year multi-million-dollar deal. Someone's got to teach him how to bounce.
His second run in AAMI Clangers for the year came. We showed him in round one for a similar incident. Harry Mackay gets in for this week. We go next to Metricon Stadium. This was a procession, Kane, for the Power. Their 12th straight win over the Suns and they're 8-0 against bottom 10 teams. The Power, it was all too easy with goals like this.
Yeah, so let's track Stephen Motlop here. He just runs through the screen there. Ollie Wines has got the footy. He's run past two Gold Coast players there. He's going to continue going as Willem Drew gets it. Off to Lockie Jones. Two bobs up inside 50 off Mitch Georgiades. Well, it's Stephen Motlop. Had a massive day, Motlop, 26 and 2 goals. Port Adelaide, they nearly took 100 uncontested marks. This is the way they want to play. First 6 rounds of the year, this was their biggest scoring area from the back half, possessing the footy. Long unpressured kick inside 50, one-on-one with Dixon. Not too many defenders in the competition going to beat that. So what did we learn out of this game? Not a lot. Port Adelaide's record against the bottom 10 sides is as good as any. They struggle to beat the top side, so we'll find out a bit more when they play Melbourne in a couple of weeks. And we know what we know about Gold Coast. Their chairman during the week called them insipid against Fremantle, and I reckon it was a pretty good word to describe their performance today.
They're now 3 wins and 40 losses in games after the halfway point of the season in the last 5 years. More of the same today. No connection between their midfield and front half. Up until half-time, they had the same amount of inside 50s as the Power. The Power led by 5 goals. The Suns had kicked 2 goals to that point of the game.
Yeah, so just the inefficiency going forward. There wasn't the issue getting it inside 50. In fact, they won the stoppages as well, pretty strong from there. But Port Adelaide just knew they were going to kick it straight back to them. So Jonas is a good intercept player. Alir, that's what his strength is. Now, he had a big game, 20 disposals. He had 12 intercepts, and he took 3 contested marks for the game. So when Port Adelaide's defence are allowed to play like this, good luck, because that's how they get their game going. When they're challenged and you send the ball in with some speed and not just that, straight down the middle of the ground where it's so easy to rebound like Geelong did to them last week, they have a bit more trouble. So Jared Leonard came in to give them some height across half back and they look rock solid behind the ball, but that's because Gold Coast allowed them to be.
Ollie Wines, 43 disposals, Kane, a career best for him. Almost 700 metres gained, which is probably an un-Ollie Wines-like game, but that's the room and the no pressure the Suns are allowed to let him off the leash. The downer, though, was Robbie Gray's knee injury. They're suggesting it's a medial at this stage, not how you want to finish your 250th game of AFL footy.
Yeah, look, just halfway through the second quarter in his game 250, what a player he's been. So medial, traditionally 4 weeks, and it looked like a pretty nasty one, like he was in a brace after the game and spoke of the pain. He said after the game, hoping to get him back before final. So you would think that is a 4 to 5 week injury. And they also had Lockie Jones do a pretty nasty hammy. So a couple of changes for Port Adelaide. They can't wait to get Zach Butters, Dersma and Tom Cleary back into that side from injury.
David Swallow was subbed out for the Suns with concussion as well. Down to Hobart, Kane, Brisbane kept their spot in the top 4. They were made to work for it. We'll go to the third quarter here. The Roos actually led the game here, 3 points with 5 minutes to go. It was crying out for a big moment, and Eric Hipwood delivered this.
This is an amazing mark. Like, honestly, that is just sea ball. Look, only eyes for the ball, and the technique of that in slippery conditions, bit of rain around, cold. He just attacked it, launched it. And this was even better. In an area of his game which has been a weakness, he's coming off kicking 1-4 the previous week. That did not look like missing. That was the spark that got the Lions going. And you mentioned a bit of a spray that they got at halftime, particularly directed to their midfield.
Yeah, the midfield, Lachie Neale said post-game copped a bake at half-time, and they really stood up, those midfielders, after the main break. Lachie Neale, Kane, Jared Lyons and Zach Bailey had a stack of the footy in the second half.
Yeah, so this is their numbers. Lachie Neale had 20 disposals and 6 clearances and a goal in the second half. Lyons had 19 and 6 tackles, and Bailey, he'll see him here, kicked just a clever goal. He knows where the goals are. He had 17 and that goal there. So they get Dane Zorko back next week. That adds to it. Berry also a matter of 1 or 2 weeks before he's back into the side, if not next week. So I do think they have so much depth through their midfield, and they almost flicked the switch. Chris Fagan said after the game it was a really good test case for them tonight. It was a tough, hard-fought, contested game. Usually they're used to those dry, sunny conditions in Queensland, so it was a bit of a challenge, the conditions for them. Pretty impressive performance, particularly in the second half.
The Lions kicked 5 of the last 6 goals. It was more of the same for the Roos. Take a look at some of these numbers. In the last quarter, they're minus 187 for points in the final term this year. They're just falling away when it matters most.
Yeah, do we need to talk more about the Kangaroos? Like, they've won 1 game out of their last 27. We're looking at one of the worst teams in the AFL era, really, when you look at win-loss. And I know, they had a draw last week and they've been in some winnable positions, but they've won 1 game for the year. They've won 1 out of their last 27. So what has gone on at this club? And this, clearly not criticism directed towards David Noble, because I think he's going to be a fine coach and do a great job. But we are watching one of the worst sides we've ever seen, unfortunately, and the win-loss record backs that up, and that was the case again tonight.
Massive game next week, North Melbourne and Gold Coast. Both of those sides desperately need a win. To the ladder, as it sits with 1 game to go in round 13, Melbourne will finish it 1 game clear at the top. Geelong and Brisbane round out the top 4. It's going to be a bit interesting at the bottom. Richmond in 8th position there.
Yeah, and I think the Giants, what they did tonight, just keeps it nice and interesting as well. There's still some hope for Fremantle and the Bombers, who have got Hawthorn tomorrow, just to stay in touch with Richmond. So far from done, as much as we thought a fortnight ago that the top 8 was locked in, and it probably is, but it's going to be a little bit more interesting than perhaps we predicted 2 weeks ago.
Essendon down to Tasmania came for the first time since 1992. 5 changes for the Bombers. They win this, they're a game outside the top 8.
Yeah, which you would think they would, albeit Hawthorn were really impressive last week. But with Essendon's in, they've gone all in for this game. 5 changes, some real quality back. You'd expect them to win if they want to have any say for the back half of the year.
We love a hanger. It's our one more thing this week. Back to Friday night VFL action. Jack Boyd Kane for the Northern Bull Ants. This is a pretty nice mark.
It's one of the best marks I've ever seen. Look at the sit. So you got the sit and then the double ride. I love the little extra boost just there. That's what you want with a big hanger. We love high-flying marks. So good on the young lad.
Looks a bit like Joey Danaher with the Red Sox up. Kane,
he did a bit.
I'll see you flying over this way
I'm back next week.
All right, we'll get on the plane.
I promise you.
Just like Jack Boyd, I'll see you here in the studio next week.
Stephen Marshall, South Australian Premier, open up the borders so we can get the juggernaut round so far back to its absolute best. We'll see you next week.